Good morning and welcome to this edition of Expert Speak. Today I have an extremely well-known authority in the field of international trade and development, Professor Prabir. He's the head of the ASEAN India Center at RIS and has authored many journals and papers and books on the subject. A very, very familiar name in the strategic community in Asia and India, of course. Professor De, may I say that I'm totally delighted to have you on board on this edition of Expert Speak, and welcome to you.
Thank you, Shaposachi, for the invitation. Thank you very much. And it's a great pleasure speaking to you. Also, your organization, Asian Confluence, which has been done tremendously, very important works for the last few years. I've been following your organization, your activities, and thank you very much for the invitation, Shaposachi. Thank you.
Thank you. So today we are going to discuss on the subject of trade and connectivity in the Bay of Bengal region as part of a new era that we are in, which is the COVID era. And so therefore, may I ask you, Dr. De, that how do you see in this COVID era and these pandemic times that we are going through, and then there's going to be a phase of recovery whenever this immediate threat of the pandemic ends. There are tectonic shifts in the global order. The way of doing business is not going to be same. We are entering a new normal. How do you see that all this panning out into regional cooperation in general in the Bay of Bengal region?
Thank you, Shaposachi. Thank you very much. It's a very important question you asked at the very beginning. Yes, we are in great uncertainty, and this uncertainty started with a health crisis driven by the virus COVID-19. And now we landed into an economic crisis, particularly the Bay of Bengal economies, the seven members in the BIMSTEC. But to me, the Bay of Bengal also we need to count, Indonesia, Malaysia, Singapore as well. They are also very much Bay of Bengal countries. But if you look at this whole Bay of Bengal, immediate vicinity, every country is they're directly affected by the coronavirus. It started with China, but it has gone into everywhere in the world. Now, the BIMSTEC countries, or Bay of Bengal countries in general term, they have been, very much worried because the death and the virus is not so important here. Important in the sense that in the medical term, this is another, viral influenza. It can harm anybody, but the most disturbing part is it is highly contagious. So it spreads very fast, and it affects people suffering from, diseases like high blood pressure and has a heart problem, etc., and the diabetic. So in the Bay of Bengal region, if you look at our lifestyle and eating habit, we are fish and rice eating people. And I was told by an eminent doctor that almost half of our population are diabetic, and the senior citizen they affected very much for this coronavirus. That's where the crisis is now. So what we see that till now, about 18,000 people in the Bay of Bengal they got affected, and this is a common challenge. Recovery is there, but death is also high in countries like Indonesia, where very difficult to reach out to the islands, with the doctors, with medicines, with others facilities. So this is a common challenge in the region, and the Bay of Bengal countries are presently looking at the usual way to uh, to encourage the activities in the region. But presently, all of now in lockdown. It's a similar fashion or similar style to look at the pandemic, that go into lockdown, and every country is now in the lockdown, and hopefully you cannot have a long time lockdown, and you cannot, this will have a huge impact on the economy. So I think by May first week, most of the Bay of Bengal, I just collected some information. The lockdown will be, lifted partially, and economies will come back again to, we need to encourage the economic activities. So here government is coming with the two types of arrangements. It's very usual and common that we have, every countries are come with, already announced a fiscal stimulus, and then some countries are also in monetary stimulus, central banks playing a major role. Fiscal stimulus is basically to supply, to add the liquidity in the market. It's kind of a recovery would be kind of a demand driven, unlike what we have seen, global financial crisis in 2007-8 or the Asian crisis in 1996. Here it is a sort of a demand driven recovery, means you need to pump the money to the people, particularly the deprived classes, for example, migrant community, give them the money, and then it will pick up the market demand, and then there will be liquidity. So this is the whole cycle, basically the doctor's prescription, but it may not work. Reality, we really do not know how long this pandemic will continue. Now, here comes the regional corporations. Why? Because it's a common challenge. In Bangladesh, something around 1,600 people till morning today, they got affected, 1,600. Whereas in Bhutan, it's only 5. But if you look at asymptomatic patients, which are having a very low level coronavirus, they but just spread it very fast. But the patient who is carrying a coronavirus, he may not or she may not be knowing he got affected until he or she passes for few days. By the time he or she spreads this. So all I'm telling, the number is small in some countries in the Bay of Bengal. India is coming in the top in the list within 14,000 or people who got affected till today morning. But this number may go, may go up. As we start doing more tests, as we start doing, more detailed investigations, and if you factor in the asymptomatic patients in that sense. So why it is regional cooperation so important? Because here this 7 countries in the Bay of BIMSTEC, or maybe 10 countries in the Bay of Bengal, they may not be having adequate number of medical supply or medical health infrastructure. So they need to speak each other, who is doing what, sharing of information, and if anybody is doing any kind of coming up with invention like the vaccine or some medicines, then they can share it globally. For example, if Bangladesh recovers faster than India, or India recovers faster than Singapore, this will have a triple effect, ripple effect in the regions, because if you look at regional cooperation, then trade or investment or economic relations, all the partners, they have to be recovered from the crisis. One country is still remain in the crisis, rest have recovered, may not make sense, right? It's a prosper the neighbor. Everybody in the neighborhood have to come out from the crisis, and they will be then waiting for the tide to come and enter into the boat to ride and move on. So this is here comes I feel strong regional cooperations. Some countries have done pretty well in containing the virus in the Bay of Bengal. Some may not, but there are cases to report that once they are get out of this virus, I do not know when, they need to look at that. They should not go back to what it used to be in the pre-COVID areas. They need to
Right.
look at, as you said, Sabasaki, this new normal. Like, what a new way to start the regional cooperation, new way to start trade, etc. So South Asian countries, South Asian leaders, Prime Minister Modi, he took an initiative, and last month the leaders they met on on video conferencing. They have announced a South Asian fund, and then they had follow-up meetings. They are discussing the new protocols, and fund has been set up. Every member countries they have committed. If you look at ASEAN, our immediate neighbor, 2 member countries of ASEAN are also member of BIMSTEC, the Bay of Bengal initiative. In the ASEAN, they already have a very detailed level interaction with the European Union, because the European Union member countries, they are service state partner, good state partner. So they need to have an understanding on the new protocols that they have to follow. They also had a very detailed discussion they have been doing with the China. On 14th of April, ASEAN has COVID-19 summit. So all the leaders they met online, plus ASEAN plus 3 summit, China, Japan, and Korea, back to back, and they had a declaration issued on 14th of April. Just today is 17th, 3 days back they had it issued in online. So, and their declaration also talks about many things, but 3 things are very common that we have been talking about. One is this funding, second is the capacity development, training, third is to supply the infrastructure like kits for treatment for the nurses, health workers who are in the front line, and third is doing joint research and development, science and technology cooperations, doing more closer network of think tanks, medical professionals, health services workers, etc., etc., so that they can contend jointly together this great crisis. Other one, the one I would also like to emphasis here for the BIMSTEC, that this what I found, the declaration of the ASEAN plus 3 and ASEAN, they are also not completely telling that the coronavirus will disappear. They say that this is going to be here. So get ready with another kind of a virus or another kind of pandemic.
Yes.
So this is a part of your cooperation, part of your the regional development. So these are the important insights that I could gather from the declaration of ASEAN and ASEAN plus 3 level, which having very important implications for Bay of Bengal. So bottom line is, why is regional cooperation is important? Because we need to know who is doing what, data sharing, information sharing. Second is, you need to set up a protocol, because the trade which will be happening between Bangladesh and India at the border, or by air or by sea, trade in the region, the customs officer, the immigration officer, the people who are there to managing our trade, regulating authorities, they will be seeking new certificates. Is the consignment is corona free or not? So this kind of protocols we have to generate, and for which the countries need to speak each other. Ultimately, who is importing? The consumers. The consumers' health is very much important. Anything we import from the country, we have to be very certain that this is free and good to consume. So this sort of new things we see, plus the new norms, the social distancing, maintaining the norms and rules and regulations for keeping these products or services safe from the pandemic. Those are we'll have to follow henceforth. So I think these are the new areas. The countries they need to speak each other. They can set up a new standard operating procedures for countries to do the trade or investment, any sort of cross-border economic activities. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And in follow-up, what I'd like to just ask you, you mentioned that, which is very rightly, that the there's going to be a need and a demand for new standard operating procedures, and new ways, new certifications. And in the Bay of Bengal region, and if I may come closer home in India, particularly within the eastern India and the immediate neighborhood, uh, we are anyway having problems of uh, formal trade being very well integrated. Trade facilitation is already weak. There is also it is also skirted because by informal trade, which how do you see in this post-COVID times? And as you again very correctly mentioned, it's not just Corona. There are going to be new challenges for which we have to be ready. Corona has just shown an example of what is possible. So as we move towards, in the spirit of regional cooperation in the region, in the Bay of Bengal region, how do you see the logistic services, the border trade facilitation services, and how do you see these sectors panning out essentially?
Good. See, first of all, presently the border is closed.
Yeah.
In the BIMSTEC countries, for example, who are connected, the land, and there is no consignment. If I'm correct, I was told that no trade is passing through the border between India and Bangladesh. So also between Bangladesh and Myanmar to Thailand. So once these countries come out of this pandemic, so they will be certainly resuming the border trade at the border. They will be doing it. Trade will come back, maybe gradually, or the IMF report, which they launched just a few days back, it says that it could be kind of a V-shape, means very fast pickup for the trade as well. Very fast pickup because countries are hungry, there's a huge appetite. Please send the consignments, but countries will be equally asking for, as I said, the new certification, the new kind of procedures. So for which you countries, they need to discuss the protocols, and that's what I seen the very the press report released by the Ministry of External Affairs in the COVID fund for the SARC, where what exactly they are going to do with it. They are talking about these arrangements, that's protocols amendments, and amending the protocols under the standard operating procedure takes time. So before the border is opened, can the member countries, they look for kind of a mutual understanding. Second is what it used to be earlier, on the trade, that you have every countries, they have a trade facilitation single window. India used the SWIFT. Bangladesh use their platform. Bhutan use another platform. Nepal, Sri Lanka, everybody has their own platform. Now these platforms, these digital platforms for export and import, they don't talk each other. This is the kind of a standalone. So now we will be doing it social distancing. We will be more depending on the digital technology for trade to route through. And while India has made phenomenal progress in terms of trade documentation, in terms of trade arrangements. So once the SWIFT introduced, I was told there's almost 98% of India's all consignments, the documentary part is routed through the SWIFT. It is a single window. Every agencies, government agencies, they are part of it, so that we don't have to go to every houses. It's there. So every countries are doing, but these platforms, they don't talk each other. Like once you go for an e-commerce, order through an e-commerce platform, but it is restricted to that particular country. It's not. So, for example, Amazon India and Amazon Thailand, they don't talk each other. Or the Uber in India and Uber in Singapore, they don't talk each other. Or the Grab in Singapore, they don't talk each other to the Grab in that app we use for the calling cabs and all. So these kind of missing links are there. Now they all countries will try to integrate. The benefits of integration is that these interfaces, which that the technical people, they call it is the interoperability of the interfaces, so that your documentation, your signature, your rules, regulation, and counterpart or your partner countries who are importing or exporting, there is a full convergence. So this is, I think, rapid scale the countries will proceed now. And then what will happen if if you will see that this is doing pretty well in terms of trade creation, then countries will go for a regional single window. Presently, we do not have any regional single window in South Asia. There is no project. We have no regional single window for trade facilitation in Bay of Bengal or BIMSTEC. There is also nothing in ASEAN. There is a project in ASEAN single window. But ASEAN single window for the customs only restricted to a few countries. So these interoperability of the trade facilitation windows will be take up, in a war footing stage, so that consignments they don't get lost in between or they don't stuck at the border. So, and then second is there are issues in the banking sectors, regarding payment. Who are the sufferer for this kind of pandemic? Those who are doing small and tiny, tiny exporters and importers in the region, who are supplying, it's very small consignments, and they do the things on not through LC payment. They do the things on advance payment. Make full money in advance. I will then supply you the consignments. Or understanding is so well that you supply the consignment, I will pay you later. Like if our importers, small, tiny importers in India, or for example in other countries in the Bay of Bengal, if they import anything from China, LC doesn't work. It has to be an advance payment through PayPal. You pay a full amount, then the consignment comes. So in case this pandemic, this crisis is actually, these guys, they lost the money because their consignment lost. They could not send the goods. So these small, tiny exporters, importers who suffered a loss in this time, we need to bring them through a better way to do trade, advance payment. Or the payment on cash or informal money, it is not the good way to do business, right? So these guys will be, they will be should be given proper training and, good amount of capacity building, so that, this will be more informalized than informalized. Presently, India-Bangladesh trade, lots of it's informal. It is, I know, and this will, informality means either of them are avoiding taxes and duties and information. So it should not be actually. So this time, if the trade passing through most of it through the border and through the online systems, we will get it will be reflected in the trade statistics, and it will also give good support to our the regional corporations, plus the duties and taxes. In that we will look at it. Most important, the health aspects. Those who will be importing informally, and they would also at the risk, because that good may not satisfy or certify that this is a virus free, right? So with that, this is where the new template and the new normal, we have to. Government has a major role because the onus is with the government. They have to guide here, to the private sector, the custom house agents, to the freight forwarders. They have to amend the protocol if required. They have to create new standard operating procedure, and there is a common interest for it. If India, Bangladesh set up an example, then this could be a great example for Nepal, India, or Bangladesh, Nepal, or in the countries in the BBIN or in the BIMSTEC. Secretariat, BIMSTEC, they have a very strong role to play. Plus, the way India has made a role in case of SARC, the fund. Here, India also has to give, leaderships for BIMSTEC to, creating this new template, creating a new trade environment in the region. See, SARC online video conferencing among the leaders become a model for G20 actually. Became a model for ASEAN, because SARC the first to give us that even though they have differences, but they can go beyond the differences and can create the second hand, hold their hand, and for betterment of the people of the region, and that has motivated others to follow the same. So coming back to conclude for your here is that the be it BBIN, be it BIMSTEC, or between the bilaterally, the countries, they need to do some extra bit to come out with a new trade environment in terms of rules, regulation, procedures. It should not become another cumbersome thing. In the name of procedure, we get cautious. Oh, there will be new steps, there will be new compliance procedure. It should not be. After all, the countries who are partner in SPS or TBT agreement or WTO, sanitary, phytosanitary, technical barriers to trade, where we have, set procedures in terms of fumigation, in terms of traceability, in terms of the quality of the goods for safe to health consumption, So those are there, perhaps we don't enforce much. So here, I think we need to go revisit and come out with a new template for the BIMSTEC, for the BBIN, for the SARC, or between at the bilateral level. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you very much. That was very enlightening, and I think you also harped on the fact that informal trade, which forms a major portion of trade, say between India's northeast and the neighbors, Manipur, and in Manipur between India and Myanmar, or India Bangladesh. It waits to be seen how that is going to. It's probably going to be taken with a lot more of doubt whether the products which are coming in through informal trade are safe by the consumers. So we are entering a new times, and I think you put in a very clear light at the end of what kind of negotiations should happen. Obviously, government has to take the lead on that. We don't have much time remaining because of this, but may I just ask you to speak very briefly on maybe a minute on what you see the implications of this on the Indian Northeast region and its immediate neighborhood, because the region depends immensely on its evacuation of its goods with immediate neighbors such as Manipur, Myanmar and Bangladesh, for example. A very short comment from your side, please.
Well, this time, the northeastern part of India, they have a very strong role while we move our focus to Southeast Asia through our Act East policy, because northeastern states, 8 states, we have the numbers of the corona affected people, a very, very small number, and we know very well why northeastern states are insulated from this pandemic, and because their heritage, their the lifestyle, all are different, So and if you look at the other side of the border, like Myanmar and Bangladesh, same, they are also not very heavily affected. So while rest of India, rest of South Asia, in terms of the corona affected people, they were having quite a bit number of patients, but this part are much better in position. So once this coronavirus things, we overcome the coronavirus and pandemic, and then we move into uh, stronger relation across the border. The northeastern states of India will be a bit ahead in terms of connecting us with the Southeast Asian countries and also Bangladesh, for example, because they were not having enough uh, uh, patients, and they are relatively better in condition, the environment, so fit for trade or fit for doing any kind of cross-border activities. Now, what is that we need to do in the post-pandemic or post-COVID-19 phase? I think Government of India has to complete pending tasks in physical connectivity. Uh, for example, the completion of the trilateral highway, uh, completion of other projects in the physical and digital area, the Kalandan multimodal transit transport project, development or redevelopment of ports, shipping infrastructure, completion of the BIMSTEC motor vehicle agreement, BIMSTEC, Bay of Bengal trade facilitation agreement, Bay of Bengal coastal shipping agreement, all those pending works, we have to complete, because in the post-COVID-19, these agreements was actually guide. Countries will use these agreements for trade, for promotion, and cross-border promotions, creating supply chains. But these agreements also need to revisit, because, as I said in the beginning of the conversation, because this is a new normal situation, there will be a requirement of more new type of templates for trade process and procedures. So those agreements which already completed negotiation or in the process of negotiation, they need to recast a little bit of it, basically to keep a safeguard in case this kind of pandemic happens. This never happened after the Second World War. So this is completely new to all the member countries in the Bay of Bengal. So northeastern states of India, this is the time they need to re-engage with the Southeast Asian countries, South Asia like Bangladesh, in terms of trade, transportation, value chain, and these would be very useful for their development of the northeastern states. Also the economic growth. We've seen in several studies that a stronger cross-border economic relations in terms of value chain creation, in terms of trade or development, that go on add the growth as well. So new areas, I think Sikkim has the pharmaceutical cluster, northeastern entire has a handicraft clusters, tourism, education, horticulture, agriculture, floriculture, and many other new areas, plastics, bicycle, petroleum products, for example, the new Maligaon refinery, they are projects sending the petroleum products through pipeline to Bangladesh, to Parvatipur, or with More at Tamu through the pipeline, the proposed pipeline. So those are new things we need to complete, because trade agreement that India is not part of the RCEP. So what is the next is in the post-COVID-19 is countries will giving more focus on the health areas, focus more on on the completion of the connectivity, particularly the digital and physical connectivity, and creation of supply chains. Now, so these are the areas where in Northeastern are much ahead in terms of proving that this is good for the business. So I think this is somewhere the new areas that we look for the trade with the Southeast Asian countries. So these are the very quick my observations on the post-COVID-19 situation between northeastern part and the Southeast Asia with the Myanmar and Bangladesh.
Professor, may I just make a follow-up question in light of what you just said, and in the light of certain recent developments? in the Northeast region with respect to COVID-19. Asian Confluence is headquartered in Shillong. So I'll cite you an example from Meghalaya, where the first cases of COVID-19 was detected a few days ago. And soon after, the patient died. And though, as you rightly pointed out, the numbers are less, but there have been a lot of questions raised on the preparedness of the states in dealing with a pandemic like this. Which brings me to my actual question to you, which is that, for example, the patient could not be buried. There's a lot of confusion on how the patient of COVID-19 who succumbed to his to the coronavirus. He was a very well-respected doctor, but there was a conflict and there was a confusion about how what would they do with the body essentially. So this has raised a huge furor. The local government, which is the Rangba Shnong, which is the local headman of the Shillong city, they opposed the procession or funeral procession to take place, and the crematoriums opposed burning of the body. So finally it was sorted out, but there was a lot of confusion about it. So which is what I'm asking you is there is a serious lack of capacity. And when we are talking about the Northeast playing a very important role in the post-COVID era, there is a need to acknowledge that needs to be capacity building made, both in civil society, in government, as well as the public in general, and the local forms of government which exist in the region. For example, in some of the 6 scheduled areas, there are the district councils which exist. So those forms of government also need to be enhance their capacity. What can be done in that regard? If I may ask you a general question to start with, before I ask you my last question.
This is something not with regional cooperation in the Bay of Bengal, but there is a regional cooperation angle, which I will talk later. First of all, these 8 states, the northeastern states, they have to strengthen their capacity health infrastructure. Now, this is the pandemic and was never there in the past. So hospitals, primary health centers in India, primary health centers are, we know very well, it is yet to come to that stage, which could be, we won't say it is, primary health centers are doing pretty well in the country. So northeastern states where the population, if you look at it, concentrated mostly in the tier 2 and major cities like Guwahati or Shillong, as you said. But the people who look at the health centers, they have to commute a bit far, compared to rest of India. And the communication infrastructure there is not that good compared to what we see in Bengal or in Maharashtra or in Madhya Pradesh. Right. So they have to incur a huge amount of time, a huge amount of exertions to reach out to the nearest health centers. Now, northeastern states, we see from the statistics that they don't have adequate capacity. So here, I think that's a great role. The state government, their link, their relation with the Ministry of Health and Family Welfare, plus ICMR, the nodal agencies in India, Indian Council for Medical Research. Second is the infrastructure to be developed through the states, their own arrangements. And third is there is also another angle which we look at that for example many of the patients, as you said, in Shillong city, you really do not know where from this virus has come. After all, in the country, the virus is imported, right? It has come from abroad, not within us. So and since it's sharing a border with Bangladesh, is another affected country. So we really do not know where from it has come. So in that sense, you need to, the northeastern states, they also have to reach out to the neighboring countries like Bangladesh and Myanmar. What's happening in the bordering areas, right? Since the
Right.
border is open, border is not fenced, people, they mix up each other. So here comes, where Asian Confluence can play, a civil society like Asian Confluence and others, they can play a very strong role to talk to the border areas, border authorities in the immediate hinterland in the vicinity to understand the health issues, which we haven't done in the past, but perhaps there was no need in that sense. But this time, once we go back from what is happening in the post-COVID-19 period, that probably Asian Conference can take up a project, take up a civil society dialogue with the northeastern states sharing border, like Meghalaya, Assam, Tripura with Bangladesh, and West Bengal, if you can count, even though West Bengal is not technically is not part of Northeast, and similarly Mizoram, Nagaland, and Manipur with the Myanmar. The dialogue between the state level, subnational level, of course with the guidance and in concurrence with the state governments and the Ministry of External Affairs and other central agencies, to reach out to the people, to the agencies, to the regulators regarding the these viral infections and or any kind of disaster, natural disaster happen. If today this is a pandemic which issue triggered by an health, but tomorrow there could be anything which is a form of a natural disaster. It's a earthquake-prone zone. You do not know. Yesterday there was a 5.9 Richter scale earthquake very near vicinity of Shillong. It's called Phalam, which is on almost about an aerial distance would be 100 kilometers from Shillong, or maybe 200 kilometers, less than 200 kilometers from Imphal. So these are the disaster-prone area, health-wise or otherwise. So civil society has a very strong role in terms of collection of information, in terms of in terms of getting reaching out to the local agencies and more network, doing things together when the crisis happens, and strengthening the capacity in the process. The health workers in the Northeast, the health workers in the Bangladesh, can they talk each other when there is a requirement? At the moment, there is no such network, right? The medical professionals, the doctors and health workers in Northeast, and that was also with the Bangladesh or Myanmar. Maybe this is a time from this experience, Asian Conference, the most energetic person like you can take it up, and can set up, a dialogue that medical college in Shillong, or a medical college in Dhaka or Rajshahi, or the medical college in Mandalay or Yangon can talk to our medical college, private medical college like which is being run by Dr. Palin in Imphal, or medical college in Imphal cities in Guwahati. This is a requirement, the common challenge. So here comes the regional corporations. Of course, the national funding, national support is the most important. Government guidance is most important. But there is also an angle across the border cooperations in BIMSTEC at a bilateral level, at subnational level, or at both at track 1 and track 2. Thank you.
Right. Thank you so much. And thank you for that encouragement to Asian Confluence. We certainly would like to take that forward and count on you and your guidance on that process, with your experience. And as you very rightly said, though we are maintaining physical distancing now, but the value of people-to-people relationships across borders at a bilateral or a sub-regional or a regional level in the Bay of Bengal, in a local, will carry a lot of meaning to forge those collaborations needed. So on that note, Professor Bay, may I again take this opportunity to thank you for your time to come on board, and count on your help and cooperation as always. Thank you so much again.
Thank you very much, Shashi, for the invitation. Thank you.